With its depth and comprehensiveness, the Bible has inspired and guided millions of people for generations. But did you know that some parts of the Bible were written but do not appear in the Bible we know today? One of them is Psalm 151, an emotional song said to have been written by King David after his victory over Goliath. So why was this psalm removed? The reason is not simply due to the selectiveness of scholars, but also reflects a profound lesson about God's guidance in preserving His Word. This story reminds us that not everything written by humans is fully meaningful in God's plan. His wisdom surpasses our own, ensuring that the Bible is not just a history book, but the living Word that brings salvation and guides us to truth. Psalm 151 is more than just a story that has been overlooked. It raises a profound question: how do we discern God's will and grand plan in all things? Number 1. Strength in humility. Lessons from Psalm 151. In Psalm 151, we discover a short psalm associated with King David, whose life became a model of humility and absolute trust in God's power. Although not part of the canonical Hebrew Bible, this psalm contains profound lessons about God's choices, His sovereignty, and the strength of humility and faithfulness. The psalm opens with a humble confession from David, who lived in poverty and simplicity before becoming king. "I am the least among my brothers, the youngest in my father's house. I tend my father's sheep." This is a story about the life of a young man, without status, without glory, but chosen by God to become the leader of the people of Israel. David lived a humble life, tending sheep for his family, but he demonstrated absolute loyalty to God even in those simple tasks. These are not just the stories of a shepherd, but lessons in humility that God expects from each of us. In Psalm 151, David recalls his victory over Goliath, a victory not because of his personal strength, but because of God's limitless power. When facing Goliath, David did not look at the size or strength of his enemy, but looked at the strength that God had given him. It was God who was the source of strength, and who truly won that battle. This reminds us that sometimes we cannot rely on our own strength to overcome challenges, but to trust in the help of God, who is all-powerful. David's theme of humility continues in his reflections on God's choice. Although he was just a shepherd boy, David could not understand why he was anointed king, but he knew that this was God's choice. "Who will speak to my Lord? He himself will hear me." This emphasizes that God's decision is never based on earthly standards, but is a decision that He makes proactively. God can choose whomever He wants, regardless of their background or ability. This is the truth that God wants to teach us. He looks at the heart, not at appearances or achievements. One of the most profound lessons from Psalm 151 is about trusting in God's power. David trusted God so much that he never doubted His ability to help him overcome any challenge. When he faced Goliath, David declared, "The Lord heard, and He acted." This demonstrates that David's victory was not the result of his strength, but of God's intervention and power. Sometimes in life, we face challenges too significant to overcome alone. However, when we put our trust in God's power, we receive help we cannot imagine. Psalm 151 reminds us that God can use unexpected people and circumstances to accomplish His plan. David, the youngest son in his family and a shepherd, was chosen by God as king of Israel. It was a choice that was contrary to what humans could imagine. God's choice shows that He does not look at outward appearances, but at the heart and faithfulness of a person. The great lesson that Psalm 151 teaches us is that humility and faithfulness will always make David stand out before God. Although he was a poor shepherd, David realized that everything was given by God. Humility is not weakness, but reliance on God's power. God saw not only the trivial things in David's life, but also his faithful heart. Therefore, we can find God's support and guidance when we live in humility and faithfulness to Him. Psalm 151 also encourages us to trust God's power in times of trouble. When faced with difficulties, it is not our strength or ability that determines the outcome, but God's intervention and power. God will act and bring victory, even in the face of things that are insurmountable by human strength. And, ultimately, Psalm 151 is a powerful reminder that worldly standards do not limit God's sovereignty. He can use the most ordinary people to accomplish the greatest things. This was not only an encouragement to David, but also a lesson for each of us. Be humble, faithful, and trust in God's power, for He will carry out His plans through those who are willing to listen to His call. In this life, we sometimes feel that we are not capable, strong, or important enough to do something great. But through Psalm 151, we learn that God chooses those who are humble and faithful in heart. And when we trust Him completely, He will make us great in His sight, not because of ourselves, but because of His infinite power and love. Number 2, singing the Word, the mystery of Psalm 151. Psalm 151, a short but profound song, has aroused curiosity and debate for centuries. Part of a collection of texts known as the Apocrypha, or deuterocanonical, it carries layers of timeless spiritual meaning and reminds us of humility and total trust in God. Although not part of the canon of most Christian religions, Psalm 151 offers a vivid picture of the life and faith of King David, a man chosen to bring hope and light to the history of the people of Israel. Origin and connection to the Septuagint. Psalm 151 does not appear in the Masoretic text, the authoritative Hebrew text completed by Jewish scholars in the 2nd century AD. However, the song is found in the Septuagint, the ancient Greek translation of the Bible. This collection has profoundly influenced the Eastern Orthodox and Ethiopian Orthodox traditions, where it is preserved and widely used in worship. For readers of Western Christian traditions, Psalm 151 may seem unfamiliar. The Roman Catholic Church, when establishing the Bible canon, accepted many of the Apocrypha from the Septuagint, but did not include Psalm 151. Protestant reformers, especially Martin Luther, even removed the Apocrypha from their Bibles. Meanwhile, the Orthodox churches have preserved the song, considering it an essential part of their spiritual heritage. Key, content, and message. Psalm 151 offers insight into King David, a man chosen not only to be a king but also a musician, a shepherd, and above all, a worshiper of God. The song begins with a statement of humility, describing David as an unknown young man tending sheep in the pasture. Amid this ordinariness, God saw a faithful heart, a man destined to do extraordinary things. The song continues to celebrate David's musical talent, a gift he devoted to worshiping God. David realized that all his life abilities and achievements came from God. This is the lesson that Psalm 151 powerfully conveys. Humility before God is the key to receiving His grace and strength. The song's highlight is the reminder of David's victory over Goliath, a story that tells of his courage and reflects his deep faith. David did not rely on the strength of his weapons or his experience in battle, but entrusted himself entirely to God. It was this faith that brought victory not only to David but also to the people of Israel. Theological and historical significance. Although not widely accepted in the Catholic and Protestant canons, Psalm 151 has remarkable theological and historical significance. It emphasizes the importance of humility, praise of God through musical talent, and unwavering trust in His guidance. Historically, this song opens up a new perspective on King David, not just as a mighty king or a great leader, but as a man who humbled himself before God. David is a vivid illustration of a man God used in the most unexpected ways, from a humble shepherd to the king of God's people. Furthermore, this song reminds us that God always looks at the heart, regardless of status or background. He can lift a humble person to be an instrument for extraordinary purposes. This is a call to each of us to live a life of humility, trust, and total dedication to God. Application in today's life. Looking back at Psalm 151, we can learn valuable lessons to apply today. First, it reminds us that all our abilities and accomplishments are gifts from God. When we use those gifts to serve Him and others, we live out His purpose. Second, this song encourages us to put our complete trust in God, especially in difficult circumstances. Like David facing Goliath, We too may face significant challenges in life, but faith will bring victory. Finally, Psalm 151 is a reminder of the value of humility. Today's world often emphasizes success and fame, but God looks at our hearts. When we live humbly, giving God all glory, we will be blessed and guided by Him in all things. Number 3. Lessons from Psalm 151. God sees the heart. In Psalm 151, a hymn that is not included in the official Bibles of most Christian traditions, we learn powerful lessons from the life of King David. Although it is not officially recognized as part of the Psalms, the lessons from Psalm 151 are still vivid and worth pondering. We will explore the powerful messages this psalm brings, helping us better understand how God sees us and how we can live according to His teachings. David, a young shepherd, miniature in the eyes of everyone, was chosen by God to be king of Israel. This was not because of his appearance or talent, but because of his heart. God does not look at outward appearances, but sees the loyalty and faith in each person's heart. God chose David not because he was a man of power or authority, but because He saw humility and love in David's heart. This reminds us that no matter who we are or what we have, God's choice always begins with the heart. David faced many challenges throughout his life, but the important thing is that he never lost faith in God. One of the most outstanding stories in David's life is his confrontation with Goliath, a giant warrior with great power. Unlike others, David was fearless. He trusted in God's power, and through that strong faith, he defeated Goliath. We learn that faith is not the absence of fear, but the ability to step forward confidently in God's power. God never leaves us unprepared to face challenges. When we trust Him, He will strengthen us to overcome any hardship. Another vital lesson from Psalm 151 is humility and gratitude. Although David won many battles and became a great king, he always remembered that all his victories were not due to his strength or talent. All the good things that came to him were due to God's power. Therefore, David always showed gratitude and humility before God. This gratitude helped strengthen his faith, and through it, he realized that he always needed God's help in every step of his life. The lesson from David reminds us that we should never be complacent with our successes, but always be humble and grateful to God. The victories in our lives are His gifts, and we can only survive and thrive through His guidance. David's life also teaches us that faith in God is the key to overcoming all challenges. When faced with difficulties, we should not be discouraged, but seek help and strength from God. God will always be with those who trust Him and walk in faith. Our faith is trusting in God and acting according to His guidance in all circumstances. Finally, Psalm 151 reminds us that gratitude is an integral part of the spiritual life. Gratitude helps us be more aware of God's miracles in our daily lives. When we thank God for all the good things, we open our hearts to receive more blessings from Him. The lesson from Psalm 151 is not only a lesson in humility and faith, but also a call to live a life filled with gratitude and respect for God. Through this, we can live a meaningful and prosperous life under His guidance. These lessons apply not only to David, but to all of us who seek God's guidance and love in our lives. Remember, like David, we too can overcome any challenge if we have faith in God, are humble, and are always grateful. By doing so, we will live a meaningful life, blessed and guided by God. Number 4. Essential lessons from David's life. God's actions through humble people. God often chooses people the world overlooks, people who are not remarkable in the eyes of the world. One of the clearest examples is David. When God called David, a young shepherd, to become king of Israel, his family and community did not take him seriously. David was just a tiny, unnoticed boy, and there was nothing special in the eyes of the world. But God saw David's heart and chose him, even though others could not see his great potential. This reminds us that God does not see us through our outward appearance or our worldly achievements. He sees us through our hearts, through our faith and humility. He can use people who the world deems unimportant to do great things. Sometimes we feel invisible, like no one cares, But God sees us and can use us in ways we can't imagine. Be humble and trust in God. An important lesson from David's life is the power of humility and trust in God. When we feel unnoticed or unimportant, remember that God doesn't see us through human eyes. Sometimes, humility and trust in God can help us overcome challenges we can't face alone. David was a great example of letting God work through us. Sometimes it is in our humility that we can see the greatness God wants to accomplish. Never think that taking humble steps, not looking great, is useless. Every day, every step has a purpose. God will use the seemingly insignificant times to prepare us for the more significant tasks He has for us. Never lose faith, because God works in us, even when we do not immediately recognize it. Hidden time is God's time of preparation. When we look at David's life, we see that not everything goes as expected. David's time as a shepherd may seem insignificant to others, but it was during those hidden times that God was preparing him to become a great leader. Those quiet hours, alone in nature, unseen and unknown, were actually the moments when God was training David, preparing him for a great task. The same goes for us. We may be going through difficult times that seem meaningless and worthless, but God is at work in us during those times. He never lets us go through hardships without a purpose. Every trial, no matter how small or insignificant it may seem, is part of God's grand plan for us to grow and fulfill the mission He has set for our lives. Let faith and trust in God help us overcome trials. When David faced Goliath, he did not rely on his strength or experience in battle. Instead, David relied entirely on God. He knew that God was the source of strength to help him overcome this great challenge. Goliath was a mighty warrior, but when David faced Goliath, he did not feel afraid. He dared to step out to fight, not because he was strong, but because he believed in God's help. In life, we will also face great trials that seem insurmountable. But remember, like David, we do not have to face these challenges alone. God will stand by us, giving us the strength and faith to overcome them all. Never doubt God's help, because when we trust in Him, nothing is impossible. A lesson in trust and determination. David's life is a lesson in trust and determination. When he faced Goliath, David did not give in to fear or doubt. He trusted in God and was determined to follow His guidance. This teaches us that in difficult times, we must keep our faith in God and continue to follow the path He has laid out for us, even though it may be complex and challenging. God never abandons us, and He will always provide us with the strength to overcome. A lesson in courage and humility. From David, we learn that courage is not the absence of fear, but the courage to face challenges, knowing we may fail. Humility is not self-abasement, but the recognition that all strength and success come from God. We just need to trust in Him, surrender our lives to Him, and dare to act on His leading. Like David, we can do great things in humility and strong faith in God. Number 5, the secret of a forgotten hymn. In the rich treasury of the Psalms, where the voice of the human heart blends with the glory of God, there is a little-known hymn that holds profound spiritual value, Psalm 151. It is not part of the widely recognized set of 150 psalms, but it carries a special message for those seeking to grow closer to God. Psalm 151, a song that seems to have been obscured by history, appears in the Septuagint, the Greek translation of the Old Testament. Although not recorded in the Masoretic text, the official text of Judaism, this hymn is preserved in the Eastern Orthodox Church and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church in their canons. This highlights the differences in religious traditions and raises the question, why is this hymn, despite its special significance, not widely recognized? This hymn was found in the Codex Alexandrinus, one of the oldest manuscripts of the Bible. In addition, passages similar to Psalm 151 were also discovered in the Dead Sea Scrolls, an ancient collection of texts revealing the richness of Jewish spiritual life before Jesus. These findings suggest that Psalm 151 was not just an isolated hymn, but was an integral part of the religious life of several ancient Christian communities. Psalm 151 was probably written in Greek, but researchers have recognized traces of Hebrew or Aramaic in the early versions. This speaks to the Bible's cultural and linguistic richness and reflects the universality of God's message. The poetic style of this hymn is similar to other psalms, but what makes it different is its personal and narrative nature. When reading Psalm 151, one senses the voice of an individual, perhaps David, recounting the wonders God has done in his life. He is not a powerful king when he writes these lines, but a humble man, reflecting on the vulnerability and strength of his relationship with God. Like a gem hidden in the sands of time, Psalm 151 invites us to consider, are there parts of our spiritual lives that are overlooked? Hidden corners that need to be explored and offered to God? This hymn is a piece of history and a reminder that each of us has a song, a testimony, that contributes to the larger picture that God is painting. Whoever you are, your journey of faith can be like that of David in Psalm 151, a journey with ups and downs, but above all, a knowing that God is always with you. David's song is not just the voice of one individual, but the voice of all who long to seek God. This hymn, forgotten by many, invites us to sing our song of glory to the God who never forgets his children. Psalm 151, an inspiring yet controversial hymn, was removed from the canonical Bible, raising profound questions about the process of writing the Bible and God's intention in communicating his message. From its seemingly simple yet theologically powerful lines, we learn lessons about humility, faithfulness, and unwavering trust in God's plan. While Psalm 151 is not part of the canon, it is a reminder that every aspect of our lives, big or small, can be used to glorify God. Through the story of David, from a young shepherd to a king, we see clearly that God does not choose great things by human standards, but he uses small things to create miracles. The rejection of Psalm 151 also challenges us to seek the truth, not only in what is officially recognized, but also in what is hidden behind it. That is the great lesson from God. Put your trust in him, because his plans are always far beyond our limited understanding. But love can change everything to the recognition that God is pure love. If you find this topic interesting and want to explore more mysteries and lessons from the Bible, don't forget to follow and subscribe to our channel. Let's discover more wonderful stories together, helping you be more steadfast in your faith journey.